I'm just gonna start raping you. And he's sitting down. What could possibly be in this comedian's head right now? I'm so scared. I'm so scared.
Hi everybody. Just to let you know, you guys are at a charity event. That ambulance outside is going to go to Guatemala on Monday, and they're going to build a school also. So just wanted to let you know about that. The next person, or the next act we're going to have is a comedy act. Our comedian is David Paul. David Paul is an up-and-coming comedian with a wit and sarcasm that will both win your heart and delight your mind. His style is bold and refreshing, and will have you hankering for more. So that's David Paul, guys. Let's hear it for David Paul.
Woo!
Thank you, everyone. It's good to be here tonight. I actually have a few words prepared, so I'd like to read a little something for you. Hello. How about that ride in? I guess that's why they call Logan the safest city in America. You guys might not know this, but I consider myself a bit of a loner. I tend to think of myself as a one-man comedy act. But when I stepped into the room tonight, my comedy act grew. So where there was one person with a comedy act, there was now a whole group now involved in my comedy act. There is even that guy right there, and he is now part of my comedy act as well. 5 minutes ago, when I was introduced to you guys, I thought to myself, wait a second, could it be? And now I know for sure. I just added a whole audience to my comedy act. Just the 40 of us sitting around in Logan, looking for laughter and music. All right. So, you know, as I came on stage, I noticed that a lot of you are wondering, you know, why are we here tonight? And Jesse gave kind of a nice little intro, but I'm going to expand on it a little bit. The reason we're here tonight is, of course, not to laugh, and it's definitely not to hear music. It's to support people that can't help themselves. And the reason we're doing this is because we're going to Guatemala, and we're going to help some people that can't help themselves. And so, in order for you to really understand, I'm going to compare Guatemala with another country that is really in need right now and equally in desperate straits. Now, both of these countries have been ravaged by natural disasters lately. Both these countries, just corruption is running rampant. And even the leaders of the country are so bad that the people are fearful. And the leader of this country, his skin is almost as dark as his soul. Is there any guesses which country I'm comparing Guatemala to?
America.
America, correct. But all joking aside, I do love America, and I hope I didn't offend anyone with that. So as I walked in, I noticed something that really struck me. You guys are a very attractive audience.
Yeah.
You know, I walked in and I was just like, dang, these guys are sexy. So why don't you go ahead and give yourself a round of applause for being so sexy tonight. Let's get some energy going around. Because I can see a lot of you are nervous. Because I know for myself when I go to see a comedian, I'm scared to death that they're going to suck. Because you guys paid a whole $1 to get in here. And I mean, you guys want your money worth, don't you? Don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, you do?
Yeah.
So I'm going to do everything in my power to give you your money's worth. Because that would be kind of rude of me. But I don't think you guys realize, as a comedian, I have things I'm afraid of too. You know, you guys are afraid of having a crappy comedian. What if I come on stage and I have an audience full of ugly people? For the next 40 minutes, I have to stare at you. Do you think that's very pleasant? It's not. So, you know, you guys really just need to kind of see it from my point of view too. But as I started my comedy career, I was given some advice. And now this advice at first seemed to be really good, but later on would turn out to be disastrous. This advice was to picture everyone in the audience naked. Have you guys ever heard that before? Yeah. I'm getting some chuckles. You know what I'm talking about. So, this has just not worked out well for me because I realized who came up with this. Clearly it was a man, okay? You can just see two guys sitting around, they're like, dude, I'm going up on stage, I'm nervous as hell, what am I gonna do? And his friend's just like, dude, picture everyone naked. And they're like, brilliant. But if it would have been women, the girl would have been like, just picture everyone in a cashmere sweater with their arms out, just ready to hug you. That's kind of the difference between men and women. So the reason this advice was so terrible for me was because the first time I used it, I probably didn't really think ahead. Because the first time I used it was actually at a family reunion. Yeah, let's just say that I've never looked at my cousins the same way since. If you know what I mean. So people, they kind of judge me for that because I know all of you out there have thought that at one point or another, oh, wow, my cousin's kind of sexy looking, maybe, if the mood was right. Especially I bet some of you are from Idaho know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Exactly. So lately, I've really been obsessed with words because, I'm going to be a professor, and so words have just always inspired me. And I realized the other day that words hold more power than we realize. And I realize there's kind of three categories of words that really inspire people. You have words that inspire fear. Words like marriage, venereal diseases, pop quizzes. All words that can scare the crap out of you. But then I also realized you have words that are just confusing. You have a word, say, like a bear trap. Clearly it's a trap set for a bear, right? You have a mouse trap, which, pretty self-explanatory, you have a trap set for a mouse. But the one that really gets me is, what about booby traps? What are they used for? So then, the third category is probably my favorite. You have words that inspire you. Words that can change the world. And these are the words that I've been studying and trying to find. So for the past 24 years, I have searched for that word that's going to change the world. And to be honest, I've come up with it. And now you guys can take this word home, you can use it, you can do whatever you want with it, you can write it in your journal. But the word I discovered is ta-da. This word can change a terrible situation into a situation where you're like, oh yeah, that's kind of cool. And I bet you're like, Dave, could you give us some examples of that? Yeah, I have a list prepared. So say, for example, you're driving down the road, and some of these are real-life examples, and I'll let you figure out which ones are real and which ones are made up. So you're driving down the road, and a cop pulls you over. And you've been drinking a little bit, you know what I mean? And the cop's walking up to the door, you're sitting there freaking out, you're just like, what am I going to say? What am I going to do? I got to act cool, got to act calm, I can't let him know. No, here's what you do. He walks up to your window. As soon as he walks up to your window, pull out your open container of alcohol and just be like, ta-da. Chances are he's going to let you off. He's like, oh yeah, sorry, I forgot why I was over here. Go ahead and take off. Another example, say you're at a water park. You're going down the big slide, the one that you just fly down. And you're going down, bam, your clothes get ripped off. You're in the water, people are all around you watching and laughing, and if you're me, maybe not the biggest guy, you know what I mean? And you're just embarrassed. Normally crying would be what I would do, but hey, what if I'm just like, ta-da! People are gonna be like, oh, I can respect that. I can respect that. You guy's bold. Another thing that really gets me, say you're hanging out with a young lady, and you go make the terrible decision to go to Betos. Have anyone ever been there? Or Rancherito, as they now call it. Yeah, Betos! Let's hear it for Betos! Yeah, terrible idea if you're on a date. After you're done going to Betos, you're trying to keep it in, your stomach's just growling, and you're doing a physical activity, it slips. You fart. What do? Just yell, ta-da! She's gonna be like, impressive. That was a good one. So many uses for this word. And perhaps my favorite one, now I'm not saying I've used this one, but say you're, things are going well on a date. You decide to watch a movie. We all know what that means. And so you're sitting there, cuddling a little bit, the movie ends, the credits are rolling. You're thinking to yourself, I gotta make a move. I have to do it. A few seconds into it, finally you just look at her, and I always try and come up with a witty line, just because I feel that somehow it makes it better. I'm just like, I just had a crazy thought. And she's like, what? I'm like, I think I'm gonna kiss you. You know, I don't know why I do it, but I do. But sometimes when you start making out with a girl, sometimes you can just tell she's not enjoying herself. And for me, this happens quite a bit. And I've always wanted something where I could just be like, switch, you know, it just turns well. So say you're making out with a girl and it's going terrible. Yell ta-da. Ta-da! She's just like, oh my gosh, yeah, I've had worse, I guess. You know, there's a guy named Clint that I used to date. That's for you, buddy. So words are very powerful, but sometimes words are not enough. Sometimes you need a little something else. You need something called drugs. Yeah. My favorite drug, probably Loratab. Because, you know, sometimes you have surgery and the doctor gives you your medication. No, I'm not talking about just recreational use. I'm talking about, like, certified medical usages, because I'm not for using drugs at all. So, I'm talking about when you get in an accident, they give you Loratab, just the greatest feeling ever. It just makes you feel like life is great. And I remember a couple years ago, I got in an accident, and I thought I was going to die. And then these drugs brought me back. And so I was taking these drugs one night, and I was just feeling fantastic. And I'm just pacing around the house, you know, I'm just feeling good, my body's just alive, the neurons are firing. And all of a sudden, I'm like, I should watch TV. So I go up to the TV, and I start watching the TV, and all of a sudden a magician comes on. And I don't know if you've ever watched a magician before, but they'll blow your mind off drugs. Can you imagine what they'll do to you if you're actually on drugs? And so I start watching it. And it's David Blaine. Some of you guys may have heard of him. I think he actually works for Satan. Just some of the things he does. It's like, you can't do that. You're a human, you know? And so I start watching this, and all of a sudden he looks at the screen partway through his act, and he looks, I swore, right at me. And he's like, David, would you like to see some magic? And I'm freaking out. I'm looking around. Me? And he's like, yeah, you. I'm just like, I'd love to see some magic. So he's like, watch this. He's like, I'm going to flip through this deck of cards. He's like, I want you to pick out a card. And so he flips through it, and I see a Queen of Hearts. And I want you guys to remember this, because the joke at the end is not going to make sense at all if you don't remember this. So can you do that for me? Okay, what was the card that I just said? Queen of Hearts. Queen of Hearts. Okay, remember that. So I'm watching him, and he takes the deck and puts it on his hand. All of a sudden, the cards start levitating in the air. And I'm freaking out. I'm like, okay, yeah, this is getting good. The cards light on fire. By this point, I'm like 3 inches from the TV, drool's coming down my face, and I'm just nodding. I'm just nodding the entire time. And so I'm just like, okay. And the fire goes out, dies down, the ashes, you know, fall into his hand, and there's a card left. And I'm thinking to myself, no way, David Blaine, can you know what that card is? No way. I'm clear over here in Utah, and I don't know where you're at, probably the East Coast somewhere. And all of a sudden, he looks at me and he says, David, this is your card. This is a special card for you. I'm just kind of like, okay, you know, you don't need to be so dramatic about it. It's just the Queen of Hearts. But I didn't say that, because I didn't want him to know. And so he goes to flip it around. He goes to flip the card around. Do you know what card that was? Anyone? I'll give you a free gift card.
Queen of Hearts.
Queen of Hearts. Jesse, you win a gift card. Come see me after the show. No, it actually wasn't. It was a picture of me naked as a 12-year-old boy. You know, that wasn't the most disturbing thing. The most disturbing thing was, I thought only my Scoutmaster had that picture. Yeah. Ew. Kind of enough to freak you out. But, you know, sometimes, as you're going through life, you know, we've discussed how words can solve problems. We've discussed how words and drugs can solve problems. But sometimes, even those two aren't enough. Sometimes, women can solve your problems. Yeah, it's true. Let me give you an example. Yeah, all the women out there, give me a cheer right now. There we go. You know you can solve problems. And so this particular problem, you helped me fantastically. I had just broken up with my girlfriend. Terrible, terrible experience. A day into it, I was just depressed. You know, I went to stay at my mother's place. Just couldn't talk to my roommates. Just terrible. And so I decided I need help. And I talked to my best friends, and they said, Dave, you need a booty call. You need a booty call to get over this girl. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the young slang nowadays, a booty call is when a young man and a young woman get together and just share their bodies. They just share their bodies, no commitments attached. And it's just a way that you can get over your problems. And so I decided I needed a booty call. And so it just happened to be about Martin Luther King Jr. Day, which was actually a fantastic time for this to happen. And I love celebrating Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I don't know why, it's just probably my weird childhood, but I always celebrate it. I go to KFC, I drink grape Kool-Aid, I listen to gangster rap music, and I really get down for this holiday. And so this particular holiday was my booty call holiday. And so we celebrated, we're feeling it, we're just, like that music that played earlier, we were getting down. And we decided to go to a dance party. And at this dance party, I met the most beautiful young lady. She was just tall, skinny. She told me she was a model, which I kind of doubt, but we'll give it to her for the story. And she showed some interest, which was really odd. And so I was like, okay, I can do this. And so I gave her my number, which usually never works out, because girls will just, David, no thanks. I'll go for a Dan or a Clint or a Jared, not a David. And so the girl gets my number, and I go home not even thinking that she's gonna call me at all. And she sends me a text, and she's like, had a really good time tonight, I hope we hang out soon. And I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, that's great. 5 seconds later, I get another text, which, was a little quick, but I was ready. And she says, hey, would you like to see me in a bikini? And I was just like, okay, yeah, the booty call, as us young kids are calling it nowadays, I'd like to participate. And so the day finally came, and we went to hang out. And we ended up having a fantastic time, went back to her place, and she's like, would you like to watch a movie? And I was like, yeah, I'd really enjoy that. And things started going downhill from here, up until this point it was a really good time. And she's like, my TV out in the living room's broken, do you mind if we go to my bedroom? Yeah, no. I was just like, I would love that. Let's go to your bedroom. So we get to her bedroom and the window's open, it's winter. She has a fan on. And she's like, oh, it's a little chilly in here. Do you mind if we get under the covers? I'm like, okay, yeah, I would actually really enjoy this. And so we watched the movie and things are just great. We're having a light cuddle, just nothing inappropriate, just a good time. And halfway through the movie, they showed a jail scene. And she turns to me and she's like, hey, have you ever been to jail before? I just laughed. I was like, you know I haven't. She's like, well, I have. And I start freaking out a little bit. I'm just like, oh, she's probably just a really funny girl, because I tend to attract funny girls. And so a little bit later on, she makes another comment. She's just like, do you believe in love? And I was like, well, it's definitely a chemical reaction that goes on, but yeah, I believe it. So she's like, I don't. She's like, it's a joke. She's like, my parents don't love each other. She's like, my dad just can't take care of himself, and my mom can't support herself. And I was like, okay, yeah. And then I just kind of put my fingers to her lips, and I'm just like, I had just had a crazy thought. And she's like, what's that? And I was like, I'm gonna kiss you right now. And so we did. And for the next 5 seconds, it was awful. It was like kissing a mannequin. She took her modeling way too seriously. She just sat there and posed. And so I realized, I can't do this. She's obviously a wonderful young lady, and I don't want to give her the wrong impression, because I'm kind of a stand-up guy. I don't want to lead girls on. And so I stop her and I'm just like, I can't do this, I'm sorry. And so, I got up to go. And she's like, well, wait, am I going to see you again? And I was just like, I don't know, maybe. And right as I said that, she stood up on the bed and looks at me, and she got this crazy look in her eyes, and she started running at me across the bed. And I'm sitting there like, what is going on? She jumps, wraps her legs around me, pushes me up against the wall, and wildly starts making out with me. And normally, yeah, that would be kind of cool. But in this situation, no. I was a little scared. So I set her back down on the bed, and I'm just like, I can't do this, I'm sorry. I should have listened to my mother's advice and waited till I was married to kiss a girl. She knew what she was talking about. And so I put her down, like, I can't do this. And I decided, I wasn't going to lead her on, so I sent her a text. And I was just like, hey, I had a good time, but I just, I got out of a serious relationship. I'd like to still be friends. Really a classy move. And I decided I'm not going to text her again after that. And for the next 2 weeks, I got 47 texts, 9 calls, and if she would have known where I lived, she probably would have come over, to be honest. And she would change. She'd start, just, I really loved you. I've never felt this way about a guy. And then the next day she'd be like, I freaking hate you. I'm gonna kill you if I see you. And then the next day I'd be like, I'm so sorry about earlier. I really care about you. Yeah. So as you can see, my dating relationships have not gone so well. And I bet you're wondering, Dave, why? There has to be a reason. You're training to be a psychologist, which I am. There has to be a reason for your mental trauma. And I'm going to let you know what it is. Growing up, perhaps a lot of you remember going to junior high. I think a lot of my trouble, stemmed from junior high. I remember one class, the teacher was talking to us about Native Americans. Now, a lot of you probably know a little bit about Native Americans, and I'm actually talking about the original Native Americans, the ones who didn't drink or build casinos, the ones who hunted, the ones who lived off the land. And so the teacher, she's like, are you familiar with the term hunter-gatherer? And everyone in the class, you get the smart aleck, he's like, it's someone who hunts. And the teacher's like, very good. And she's like, but I'm going to expound upon that. She's like, you had the hunters. These were the alpha males, the males who got the women. And like you can see the guys in the class, they're high-fiving each other. They're like, oh, I'm definitely a hunter. And they're like chest bumping. And you can see the girls in the class, they're just licking their lips. They're like, yeah. Hunters. And I'm sitting there looking around and like, what is wrong with you people? And I raised my hand, and I was like, Miss Margaret? I was just like, is there anything wrong with being a gatherer? And she looks at me and she's just like, are you some sort of faggot? And I was just like, no. She's like, what is wrong with you? She's like, I'm going to give you an assignment right now. She's like, this assignment is a 3-part assignment. She says, I want you to A, go kill something. This is an assignment to become a man, she told me. And so she said, go kill something is your first one. The second one is to get in a fight. And the third one is to disobey your mother. And I was like, well, the first 2 I can do, but you don't know my mom. And so we get started, and she's like, if you do this, you will be a man. She's like, and then I want you to come see me. And I was like, what? Miss Margaret? So, you can start to see where my problems start coming from. And so I went home, and I decided, I'm going to go kill something. So I remember my dad had given me a BB gun. And so I took the BB gun, and I went out hunting. And I saw this little bird. It was actually a baby bird. And it was just sitting in the tree, and it was just whistling a little tune. Just like... And I was like, yep, here we go. So I aimed my gun. Crack! The bird falls on the ground. I know, I don't really know what I expected. Like, I'd never really killed anything before. I kind of expected the bird to, like, jump up and be like, damn, good shot. And then fly away. No, didn't happen. The bird just lied there. And I went and picked it up, and I held it in my hand. And I was shaking, much like I was when I started this stand-up comedy act. And I was just like, little bird, what have I done? And I ran home, and I cried to my mother. And she held me, and she's just like, don't you ever be a hunter again. You are a gatherer. And I was just like, you're right. And so then the next day, we had a scout activity. And do you remember what I said about scouts a little bit earlier? Do you remember that? This is a little foreshadowing. So I go to the scouting activity, and we were playing basketball in the pool, just a bunch of rowdy boys. And so as we're playing, I realized I need to pick on someone. So I started picking on this kid that really had a temper. So I start shoving him, and I'm just like, hey, Derek, you're a faggot. He's like, what? He's like, do you want me to beat you up? I'm like, oh, yeah. I'd like you to try. And so later on, like, I just kept pestering him, and finally he hit me. And blood started coming down my nose, and I'm like, this isn't fun at all. I'm like, I don't like getting in fights either. So I ran to the showers, and I just was crying again. This is something I do a lot. And as I was crying, I look over, and there's my scout leader, and he had a camera, and he was just snapping pictures. And I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, this is just in case. I'm like, just in case what? He's like, I don't know. And then he walks off. Yeah, that was the picture that David Blaine had. That's why I was kind of freaked out about it. So then the next activity was disobey your mother. And I really think this one's going to blow your mind. Because I think a lot of you, how many of you have grown up in Utah or one of the surrounding states? Can I get a round of applause for Okay, so a lot of you probably grew up, with us, maybe a religious family, maybe not. But for those of you who have grown up with a religious family, you'll probably know a little bit more what I'm talking about. As I grew up, I was not allowed to do anything. Like, absolutely anything. If it was Sunday, I was sitting politely with my arms folded because that's what I was supposed to do. Another example, I could only watch PG movies or under. PG-13 movies were bad. They were of the devil. And so my mom would not let me watch them. And so I got to the point where I was like, you know what? I'm a 14-year-old boy. I can watch PG-13 movies. And so I went to my friend and I borrowed one. And I was so excited. And me and my little brother, we snuck downstairs. And my mom always read scriptures for about 2 hours every day. So we figured we got plenty of time to watch this. And so we went and we felt really dirty. So we closed the blinds for some reason. Just in case people saw us, I don't know. And then we went fluffed up the cushions and we sat down and we popped it in, the VHS. Some of you may have used those before. It's kind of an outdated technology. But we popped in the VHS and we started watching this. And it was good. It was scary, and not the kind of scary where like Simba dies because wildebeest like crush him to death. This was the kind of scary where you're like, ah! And so we're starting to watch it. 15 minutes into it, all of a sudden we hear footsteps coming down the stairs. And we're just like, oh crap, Mom. And so we hurried and changed the channel to like Home Improvement. You guys remember that show? And so Tim the Tool Man comes on and he's fixing stuff and he's breaking stuff, you know, doing his little antics. And my mom bursts in the room and she like had fire in her eyes. And she's just like, what were you watching? And we're kind of like freaking out. We're just like, oh, we're watching Tim the Tool Man. And she's just like, no, you weren't. She's like, what were you watching? I'm going to give you one more chance. And we're just like, oh, no, seriously, it was Tim the Tool Man. And she's like, stop it. She's like, I was upstairs reading my scriptures, and the spirit left our home. What were you watching? And we're so scared. I started crying again. And I handed her the tape, and I was like, Mom, I'm so sorry. It's a PG-13 movie. She's like, I knew it. I knew it. And she grabs it, and she runs upstairs. And I'm crying, and I run upstairs. My dad was reading the newspaper in his favorite chair, and I run up to him, and I wanted some sort of emotional support. And he's just like, he looks up, he's like, what's wrong with you? I'm just like, Mom took away the VHS, and it was a scary movie, and I knew I shouldn't watch, but I did. He's just like, are you some sort of faggot? He's like, why are you crying? He's like, I'm just like, and I start going off again. He's like, you think life's so bad? He's like, try going to Vietnam and getting shot at. He's like, then come talk to me, pussy. And I start crying again, and I didn't know what to do. And then I had this realization, and a brilliant idea came to mind. It was a ta-da kind of a moment. And so I went downstairs, and I sat in my room for a minute, and I came up with a plan. Because I realized to myself, Dave, you're a gatherer. You're never going to be a hunter. And so I'm like, start thinking like a gatherer. And so I go upstairs, and I'm like, Mom, Dad, family, I would like to make you a fruit smoothie. And they're just like, really? That's fantastic. I love fruit smoothies. And so I start making it, and I'm just like, oh, you guys, go do whichever you're doing. I'll just be in here. And so I finish making this fruit smoothie. And I give it to them in big old tall glasses, and they drink it, and they're just hugging me, and they're like, Dave, we knew you were a good boy. And all of a sudden, about 5 minutes after I gave it to them, they started getting really kind of sleepy. And they're like, oh, we gotta go sit down. And so they went, and, they went in the living room, and they sat down. And they're just like, I don't know what it is, it's 6 o'clock. And so they get a little bit more tired, and they're starting to fall asleep, and they're out. And I'm just looking at them, and I start laughing. And I went to the cupboard, and I took out the now empty bottles of NyQuil, threw them in the garbage can. Yeah, I drugged my family. Because I wanted to watch the end of that PG-13 movie. And so before I went downstairs to finish my movie, which, by the way, I really enjoyed, I went over to my mother, who was like lying on the ground, because she didn't quite make it to the couch. So she's lying on the ground, just passed out, and I go up to her. I get down really close, and I'm just like, ta-da. Yeah, so I showed them a lesson, and so I watched the rest of the movie and had a fantastic time. So as you can see, that's kind of, where I got my start growing up. So, I'd just like to thank you guys for coming out tonight. I hope you've enjoyed this. Maybe someday in the future there'll be a repeat visit, and we can get maybe double the number here. So I appreciate you guys coming out. I'm David Paul. Thank you.
Oh, you've never found a baby in a closet before?